Okay, folks. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to PHS Live, where my colleague Sonya Prescott and I are going to talk about the responsibility and the labor of curation involved in what we have styled the African American Leaders and Congregations Collecting Initiative. As more people join us, I think it's not just appropriate but imperative that we actually take a time to take a moment to remember the family of Jacob Blake of Kenosha, Wisconsin, to remember them, to remember the two other people killed by a vigilante 2 days ago on Tuesday. And then to bring everyone back, one of the things that's unique about working in the archival profession is that, as opposed to other places in our daily lives where it can seem like events move past our ability to be cognizant of them, work in archives is one place where we gather evidence of events as they transpired. So we are always in the process of becoming cognizant and regaining consciousness of events. We're almost never lost in them. And we are always called back to stories that have passed us by and stories that come from before our time. Does anybody in the chat want to hear a story? Okay.
I do. I don't know if I can.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you, Sonia. So we wanted to start today really by focusing on a couple of objects from the collections to kind of just have a point of entry for talking about stuff. One of the things that's in our possession and only recently came into our possession is this photograph. This is a gathering, a reunion of folks from what was formerly known as Comar and from the Board of National Missions, who did service under church auspices in the kind of 1963, 1965 period. So these were folks who were deployed to Montgomery, Alabama, and deployed to Watts in Los Angeles. Some of the folks on the chat are pictured here. Among them, I don't know, who's here? Clint Marsh is here, Dean Lewis. So we got this copy of the picture actually from Dean. There he goes. I'll hold this up really close. There's Dean. Dean's still with us in Santa Fe. Who else is here that we know? Oh, I know this person. There's Oscar Mcleod, right? Close in the background, in the far background, is Gay Wilmore. Rest in power, Gay. So we have personal records from Dean, very extensive personal records from Dean Lewis, first of all, who is known as a prodigious collector of material. I'm not going to say pack rat out loud, but a prodigious collector. We also have records of J. Oscar Mcleod, which we've recently processed and made accessible to researchers. And last year, Gay's family deposited the records of Gay Wilmore as well. One of the things that strikes me about this picture, and I guess the reason why I'm holding it up, is those three men, unless I'm missing Jim Costin, Gene Turner. Well, we have Gene Turner's. 4 of those men have their papers here. We do not have the personal records of virtually any of the women pictured in the picture. I mentioned this by way of saying the permanent record, the primary sources of history are deposited in archives by people who already believe themselves to be worthy of being in archives and already believe themselves to be entitled to be in archives. So the permanent record is written by people who have a preconceived awareness of their historicity. That means that people who have not historically been well served by the archival profession, people who come from marginalized communities, don't have the same preconceived awareness that what they're doing absolutely positively belongs in this kind of a space. Archivists have recognized this for a long time, beginning with the kind of urban archives movement following the revolutionary period of 1968. Archival theorists began to move away from a frame where we collect passively, where we collect just the bureaucratic residue of some kind of large organization, to one where we begin to collect actively, where we go and seek out the things that are necessary to make a full record. In the 80s, that gets formalized as the documentation strategy. And what we're doing now, and what we have renewed our efforts to do, is effectively to implement the documentation strategy specifically for African American Presbyterians. Because for too long, there's been a presumption that the archives does not necessarily serve them. And so we go through this in cycles, every 5, 10, 15 years. The necessity of doing this comes up again. And in recent years, we found that it was really important to formalize that kind of behavior, to make it part of people's job descriptions, to dedicate funds to it, so that the initiative does not just go away, that it's not carried on by word of mouth. And so one of the successes of the work that we have done has really just happened in the past couple of weeks. The family of Katie Geneva Cannon has donated a portion of her personal papers to us. They've been accessioned. We've selectively digitized some of the audio from the collection. It's a real win. The papers are being shared among us and Union Seminary in New York and Union Seminary in Richmond. Some of the more kind of sort of academic collections are going to be served at the 2 academic institutions. And we really wanted to thank the Cannon family for entrusting us with a big portion of Katie's life and ministry. I think that's what I have. I can hand it back to Sonia.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Oscar Mcleod was wondering if he could talk a little bit about that photo that you were.
Absolutely. I've got another Oscar photo, by the way. We can share that one too.
Oscar, I'm gonna turn on your mic and you'll be able to talk to David now.
I also have it online. I can share my screen. Oscar's still muted.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go.
David, I just wanted to make a correction about that photo. I believe you said something about Komar.
I did. I was mistaken, wasn't I?
Yes, that was the gathering of a group of people who were very much involved in the civil rights and in the church's involvement for racial justice, that was gathered at the Interdenominational Theological Seminary when Jim Costin was president, for the purpose of recalling their memory and experience of those events. And I believe there is a transcript of that gathering, those conversations, that Gay Wilmore made and was given to the Historical Society.
Excellent. Thank you, Oscar. I think we've just had an object lesson in the necessity of working with people while they're still with us, and on not entirely leaving the interpretation of history to historians and archivists. So thank you, Oscar. I'm going to steal the mic back from Sonia. I'm sorry, because I wanted to deliver to you guys, and we have this scanned, and this is in our digital collections as well. My favorite photograph from the Oscar Mcleod papers was Jim Foreman and Gay Wilmore and Oscar, about 1970, I think. Yeah, Kristen's got the link in the chat, I think. This is just such a, yeah. It's rare to see in archives like the, at least for an institution like us, where so much of our collections are kind of deposited by official structures, to see intimate moments and to see like casual moments that people have is really just, it's powerful for us to see as well. There's a lot of, there are casual moments in Katie's papers as well. We have artwork that she did, for instance. We have fiction in Gay Wilmore's papers. And those things are always, really precious to behold. But I'm gonna pass the mic to Sonia, who has more about Katie and about when she went to school.
All right, so for those who may not know me, my name is Sonya Prescott, and I am the Public Services Associate at the Presbyterian Historical Society. In this capacity, I basically work between two different departments. I work in public services, where I generally answer questions and do reference kind of work. I work with researchers directly, and then I also work in communications. So I find different new and innovative ways to talk to folks about the records in our collection. I've been working with David on the African American Leaders and Congregations Collecting Initiative for a little while now. And I'm happy to do it as someone who spent basically my entire life studying African American history. So this has been a kind of a dream project to be a part of. So I'm, grateful for that. And I was going to talk a little bit more about Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon, and specifically, I wanted to share with you all a video that comes from the records that we just recently acquired. And I'm going to try to share that video with you all. I'm going to share my screen. And it's essentially, it's from a moment when right around when Dr. King was assassinated, that she's talking about what that experience was like as a student at Barber Scotia College. So let me get that video ready for you all. Okay. Okay.
September 6, 1967, April 4, 1967. But with an effort, passion, analysis, fairness, and was mentioned. I read it a little bit, I became there on April 4, and thankful and grateful to this day. We have scaffolded and else who locked us in our chair. Because we were going to fix the key. We were giving our risk. We were going to very confidently open that. We can fix the meetings. It was all in one, so we didn't have to go to that door anymore. We didn't have to drink on the coffee all the time. We didn't have to run around. We were decent. We were really good with it. But they locked us in and they got us plus we had enough freedom now. We had enough young women.
All right, so it sounds like the audio didn't come in very clearly. It is up on our YouTube page. So if anyone wants to, check it out on our YouTube page, you can definitely check it out. Kristen will be sharing the link. But essentially it's a 2-minute video where Dr. Cannon is talking about how she had just come to Barbara Scotia College in Concord, North Carolina. And in April 4th, 1968, Dr. King was killed. And in this moment of crisis, when everyone was grieving and everybody was suffering through this shared trauma of losing Dr. King, they wanted to burn Concord down. They were upset. People were, were upset and angry and hurt and in pain and really suffering in this moment. And the faculty and staff and the upperclassmen sat with them and provided a sense of solace and community in this moment that helped them work through what they were going through in that moment. And to me, that just encapsulates what a HBCU can be and often is for African Americans. As an HBCU grad myself, I can just say that is an integral part of what it means to attend a HBCU. It's that sense of having faculty, staff, and upperclassmen and other people who are in a community with you, who can be there for you in moments of crisis, in moments of sadness, and also in moments of shared joy. And one of the nice things about our collection at the Presbyterian Historical Society is that we have a number of records related to HBCUs. This is because of the long history of the Presbyterian Church working with and helping to create some of the major historically Black colleges and universities. So I'm gonna skip through my presentation a little bit. I wanna show you some photos of Barbara Scotia College.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right, so I'm going to show you first where I get the photos from, and then I'm going to show you exactly the photo I wanted to focus in on. All right, so this is from our website. If you scroll down on our website, our collections page, we have a link here that says Pearl. Pearl is our digital collections repository, and it's where we store a lot of our digital records. And I did a little search for Barbara Scotia College, which is the college that Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon attended. And we have a few records here, but the one I wanted to focus in on is this one here. And
Yeah.
blow it up to make it a little bigger. Okay, so what's interesting about this photo is that the title of it is North Carolina Concord Barbara Scotia Library Move. The description reads, a part of book brigade transferring books to library in new building, Barbara Scotia College. Now this 1950 photo, what it represents to me is the kind of creativity, unity, and determination that essentially keeps HBCUs open even today. This sense of everyone working together and everybody uniting and finding creative ways and creative problem solving is an integral part of the HBCU historic experience. And like I said, we do have records of Barbara Scotia, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the other records we have. And stop sharing though. All right. So some of the other records that we have records of Barbara Scotia College, Biddle University, which eventually would go on to be called Johnson C. Smith University, Harbison College, Lincoln University, Mary Allen Junior College, Mary Holmes College, Stillman College, and Swift Memorial College. So all of these institutions are represented in our collections. And so I'm really excited to let you all know that there's going to be an African American Schools resource guide that will describe the records in our holdings specifically related to historically Black colleges and universities. So please stay tuned for that. And once it is completed, we'll make sure to advertise that guide through our usual channels. So because I work on social media, I have to give the usual plug. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and any other major social channel, because that's where we're gonna be advertising this information, as well as through our usual channels like our newsletters and whatnot. I'm gonna pass it back over to David because there was another pitch that he wanted to share as well.
Awesome, awesome. Sonia, can you cut back to the archery picture?
Sure.
I feel like
Pull that one up.
I'm thinking of my colleague Andre Brock, who is in Atlanta, who keeps begging for more Black joy on his timeline. I feel like
I don't know if it's just an HBCU thing, but I took archery as well. Like apparently that's a common thing, I guess, in HBCUs. You take an archery class. I'm going to share that photo now so everyone can see it.
awesome. Yeah. Yes, friends. So yeah, like while that's up on the screen, so what does a collecting initiative consist of? Like, what are the things that you are doing as a historical society? One of the things that we're doing is, of course, appealing to the people who we know already, who have been involved with work in the church for a long time, to consider us as their personal repository so that we can preserve their personal records and make those records accessible to the general public. For you out there in the virtual room, that means anything related to your life and ministry as a Black Presbyterian. Correspondence, minutes, reports, conference proceedings, audio and video recordings, photograph slides, all of that stuff is welcome here. The other thing that we've committed to is to attempt to kind of facilitate relationships and to build trust with historically Black congregations. We are very eager, just like we do for every congregation in the church, but we're especially eager to bring in on deposit session minutes and registers of historically Black Presbyterian churches that may be in poorer storage conditions or may not be frequently consulted. We can bring those in, properly house them, and we have the capacity to selectively digitize the oldest session minutes and registers at no cost to those congregations. As part of this initiative, that is one of the steps that we can take. This is effectively akin to what we've done in the past with what we called the Heritage Preservation Grants. We have a kind of de facto Heritage Preservation Grant for Black Presbyterian churches specifically. So anybody who's on the chat who has access to those records, please, tell your congregations to get in touch with us. My email is on the website. I'm the point of contact for congregations. And I hope that we can stay in touch. I have one more photo too. We can show photos, and then and then we should direct folks to the Q&A. In the bottom of your screen, if folks have questions, the thing to do is to go to the bottom of your screen and hover over there. If you're on the Zoom call, hover over there to where it says Q&A in the middle. And that is going to help the other folks who are working behind the scenes holler at Kristen and Allison, thank you. That's going to facilitate their work behind the scenes. I did have one, I've got probably too many photos floating around. But again, going back to institutions of education, this is from Record Group 303, which is support agency photographs. This is the Norfolk Mission College, and it's the 77th reunion of alumni of Norfolk Mission College, which was a Presbyterian institution of education for African Americans that was organized with the support of First United Presbyterian Church in Norfolk. So we make appeals for personal papers, we make appeals for congregations, and the rest of the work of the initiative is trying to go to people where they're at already. Back in the winter, I was at a Presbytery of Eastern Virginia meeting, and I packed one photo. I was like, I'm gonna bring something from Norfolk or Hampton Roads in that region. And I brought that one, and I ran into two folks who were actually members of First UPC Norfolk. We got to commune over this paper over lunch. So yeah, the contents of the archives are very often pricks to memory. They spur memory. And having that experience with people is really incredibly moving. I think that's all of the photographs. Are we ready for folks to take questions?
Sure. We had a question come through the chat from our board member, Prasavia Prelau, and she was wondering if the records of Black colleges are fully open to researchers.
So that's going to depend. Sonia, do you want that, or should I go?
Okay.
Okay, cool. Selectively, so the us as an institution, we enforce a blanket 50-year restriction on just about all records except for personal papers. Personal papers are a little bit different because they've been deeded to us by the individuals, and we just obey whatever the individuals say, and 9 times out of 10, this is open for research. Everybody else, especially in the case of institutions that we serve that have already come to the end of their period of ministry, like they've completed their ministry, they don't exist anymore, so they don't have the capacity to say yay or nay about access. We just have a blanket 50-year restriction. So only things that are older than 50 years are open to researchers. Many of the records of the HBCUs that we have are educational records, so they're transcripts of people's education. The minority of the records are things that should ordinarily be open to the general public. A lot of the material is administrative, and not to get too deep in the weeds here, but we're not a HIPAA or a FERPA covered entity. We do behave as if we are covered by the various federal laws regarding educational records.
We have a question from Margie. She was wondering where the first African American church was, and when was it chartered?
Okay. Do you want that, Sonia?
I'm gonna let you handle that one.
Ah, got it. Okay. It's First African Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia, PA. And they are, oh man, somebody's gonna really punish me. They're 1806.
Sounds about right.
ballpark. They're organized by John Gloucester. John Gloucester was the first ordained African American minister. He was manumitted by a dude named Gideon Blackburn, who was a Presbyterian missionary to the Cherokee people in, I guess, southern Tennessee, northern Georgia, that region. Blackburn is known for having his own distillery. He made whiskey. He's not totally fondly remembered by Cherokee Presbyterians. He is remarkably fondly remembered by the community surrounding First Ave here in Philly. I hem and haw about this story because it's obviously a situation where many people's values come into conflict and people have discordant memories. But yeah, Blackburn is just one of those multifaceted figures in our collections. Somebody's gonna Google First Ave and tell me I got that wrong also.
So we're getting a little help from another board member, Cornell Edmonds. He wanted to let us know it's 1807.
Oh, Cornell, thank you.
We have another question from Presavia. She was wondering how individuals and churches can help support this collecting initiative, how everyone can help.
Great question. Sonia, what do you think?
Well, I would just start off by saying one of the important things for us is really letting people know. I mean, word of mouth works wonders. And, you know, one of the things that I noticed when we attended the National Black Presbyterian Conference was that when we were there, we would just talk to people and they would say, oh, you should talk to this person. And then we go and talk to that person. And they say, oh, you really need to talk to this person. And a lot of this really just comes from a lot of good word of mouth. So that is, you know, you can't beat that and you can't pay for it. So that's a really important part of this.
Yeah, I would totally agree. We went to National Black Presbyterian Caucus in Atlanta last year. And to be totally frank, we went in without like an agenda, like without, that's my fault. I'm no agenda dude. And we came out with 4 long oral histories. We did an oral history with Corinne Cannon, you know, mater familias of the canons. And that was an extraordinary experience. We talked with Allie Latimer. Sonia did the interview with Allie Latimer. And so just things flowed naturally. Tell your friends is the first message that we have. Tell your congregations. We really are here to serve the records of Presbyterian congregations. And I think I would, you know, if you are from, as Presavia is, as Presavia's church is, if you're from a prominent, you know, historically Black congregation, we are available to digitize records for free. Like that's something that we can do. Folks who have personal papers, some of them, most of, just like everything flows by word of mouth, personal papers flow by word of mouth. One of the folks who's a contributor to the initiative, Charles Marx. We had Charles on our radar for a long time. And he came around to being part of the initiative through the work of one of our board members, you know, who was good friends with him and just had lunch, and he came on board with the initiative. So those personal connections, nobody knows me from Adam, right? I can't just walk into a building and immediately gain trust. You guys are the ones who have trust with individuals, and so you make that happen. One of the really interesting things that happens with any kind of intentional initiative is the kind of side effects or knock-on effects. So Charles did not deposit his personal papers here yet. He's still with us, kicking, doing ministry. But he was really concerned to preserve the legacy of his wife, Amal. Amal was recently deceased, and she worked in the national agency offices as congregational coordinator for Middle East ministry. She's Lebanese, and she organized the National Middle East Presbyterian Caucus. So she has a remarkable career, and his passion was preserving her career. That's a really long-winded way of saying exactly what Sonia said, which is tell your friends.
We have a question from Betty Dura on Facebook. She was wondering, she heard that First African is now combined with I think 2 other congregations, and she was wondering what it's now called.
The last I heard was the West Philly Fellowship, but I think my information is out of date. Hi, Betty, by the way. Betty Dura, I forgot to shout out at the beginning, is one of the most significant connectors that I've met, period. Betty seems to know everybody and seems to have a photograph of everybody from every conference that she's been to. And so I want to take a minute and just say thank you to you, Betty, for all of your contributions to the initiative.
And it looks like Oscar let us know that in 1977, it was the 175th anniversary of the founding of First African Presbyterian Church. Eugene Turner has a question. He was wondering how much is stored at PHS about the Angela Davis Fund and the difficulty associated with it.
I'm really so glad you asked that question. We just created a little guide to records that are responsive to Presbyterian support of the Angela Davis Legal Defense Fund. I'm going to ask Kristen to Google that blog post real quick and post it in the chat so that I'm not like looking at y'all and trying to type at the same time. The majority of the materials that we have related to Angela Davis are in papers of the moderators from during and just after 1970. So moderators traditionally will keep packets of correspondence called response letters. So any topic of real concern in the denomination during a moderator's tenure, they'll have response letters. If the year there's a report issued on human sexuality, you have half a cubic foot of response letters from individuals and congregations. And those are extremely interesting because people do not hold back. So a lot of those are response letters that are in Lois Stair's moderatorial papers. Kristen, thank you for the link. So yeah, that is a guide to the material we have on Angela Davis. Embedded in that little blog post, there is an audio clip from 1972 from a Presbyterian kind of audio magazine called Monday Morning. The clip is Gay Wilmore speaking in honestly what I can only call a victory lap, because the 72 General Assembly, or the 71 Assembly, had responded to CORAR's action by supporting it and affirming it. So his message to the denomination is, we did the right thing in the first place. CORAR had originally delivered a grant, and I feel extremely embarrassed because people on the chat were intimately involved in this. So please hop on and interrupt me. But the basic story for anybody who hasn't heard it before is CORAR issued a $10,000 grant to the Angela Davis Legal Defense Fund to support her capacity to obtain a fair trial. It caused immediate uproar, in the majority white church. They said, why are you supporting Marxism in this country, for example? And a handful of Black Presbyterian leaders gathered their own funds and made a $10,000 restoration to Korar to quell the controversy. Absolutely anybody who is involved in that, who wants to hop on, we can do that. We can hop you on here.
We have a question from Cornell. Do you have any photos of the Theodore Wright House in New York City, which was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and it still exists today?
I don't know, Cornell. We're gonna write it down. We very frequently hear from churches, especially in the kind of Ohio River Valley territory. Just about everybody in Cincinnati maintains that they have a connection to the Underground Railroad. Documentation of that is almost impossible to find, given the nature of the Underground Railroad, right? So a lot of that material is passed along through just congregation and family traditions, identifying stops.
Oscar was wondering what you say to people who say they don't have the time or inspiration to sort through what they might discard, and to maybe inspire them to send it to PHS instead.
What I say to literally everyone is to don't worry about it and do less. Like my motto in life is too short, do less. You have professional archivists who are skilled appraisers of collections. Our policy with donations of personal papers is that we consult with people about what to do with stuff that does not fit the collections. And we tend to make those decisions, on a blanket level. But you do not need to worry about sorting or arranging or scrupulously filing. Like that's for us to do. I think that's the short answer. The real appeal, of course, is absolutely no one is going to be able, no one's going to be able to see the stuff if it goes with you. No one's going to be able to see the stuff if it's in your closet. And we all have a responsibility to be witnesses. And the works that you've made, your records, are a form of bearing witness, of témoignage.
We have a question from Facebook from David Wallace. He was wondering if we have any records on Elo Henderson, James H. Costin, or Darius Leander Swan. He says they're all deceased and were significant in the life of the church.
We definitely have Jim Costin material owing to his position in the denomination. One of the ways some of that material is going to be described in our online databases. So one of the first things that we can do, Mr. Wallace, and it's good to see you again. One of the first things we can do is go to the databases and figure out what exactly we have for Jim Costin and Elo Henderson. We have a run of missionary personnel files, which covers Lee Swan, Lee and Vera Swan, but we do not have their kind of personal or family records. We had been in touch with members of the church in Burke, Virginia, where they were at, but that's just one of the, I had heard through the grapevine that their family was going to explore donating papers to the Smithsonian African American Museum. And that would be totally appropriate. I know that Katherine Johnson's family delivered her papers to the African American Smithsonian. And David, in order to make sure that we don't forget, would you email me? I'm going to put that in the chat. Hold up. Oh, you're so fast, Kristen.
We have a question from Molly Castillo. Hi, Molly. She was complimenting about our recent newsletter on the Black Manifesto, and she was wondering if we could highlight anything that came out of that article.
Yeah, I mean, some of the people on the call could really speak to the revolutionary years of 1969 and 1970 better than us. I was born in '79, so for me, one of the best stories that I don't think made it into the newsletter, but is in some of our oral histories that have been digitized and transcribed. There's an oral history with Gay Wilmore that Oscar Mcleod did, where Gay describes really being held hostage by left-wing paramilitaries. That portion of the story is particularly interesting. That was a surprise to me. The encountering a Presbyterian encounter with militancy is always, that is a standout part of the collection anytime that it happens.
Oscar was wondering, has there ever been a translation of the debate or discussion of the GA about the Angela Davis Fund by the chair of the board of National Mission Committee?
A translation or a transcription?
I think so.
Not to my knowledge. That sounds like an excellent follow-up question for email, because I would have to dig into BNM records to get it.
Joan Martin is wondering if you could discuss the nature of personal papers that can be submitted to PHS, particularly in relation to African American Presbyterians.
Sure. We have a really open collecting policy. Once upon a time, we would have, for instance, like excluded audiovisual material, to a great extent. The things to think about are, do the documents speak to the ministry that you were doing? I think that is really the hallmark. So that means documentation in any form of that ministry. So correspondence, your kind of lecture notes or research notes, essays, photographs, photograph albums, slides, audio cassettes, open reel tapes, motion pictures, DVDs, content that you've made that's born digital. We can help you to appraise significant emails and bring in email in its native form. So all of that is valid and worthwhile. Some of the interesting things that we've gotten recently that I haven't mentioned, Betty Dura, of course, is a poet. She has written choreo poems. So works of art, really, musical works, all of that stuff is valid.
Persavia was wondering if you could talk about the heritage preservation grants. Just a little explanation on how churches can digitize records.
Sure. So for literally all PCUSA congregations, all 9,900 plus, every year we issue the HPG, which is a set of generally 4 grants a year, which are grants in kind, which support digitizing session minutes and registers here at PHS by our people to the tune of about 1,000 pages per congregation. And so that is for like the whole denomination. In recent years, so we try to look for congregations that are old. Age is a factor. Records that might be in some kind of peril or danger. So for example, we did one shortly after Hurricane Maria for the church in Rincon, Puerto Rico, for example. We've done them for the churches in the Gulf Coast, which, you know, hold everybody in the Gulf Coast in your prayers during Hurricane Laura. We also look for geographic diversity for those grants. Presbyterians as a body are really clustered in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and then a big cluster in North Carolina. So every time that we get participation from west of the Mississippi, that's incredibly valuable. As far as the topic of this conversation, email me, email Sonia, because we just need to talk about the pool of funds that are available and exactly what a project for a historically Black church would look like. I think it would be in the ballpark of 1,000 pages of digitization for free. It could be more, but we need to just talk about that individually.
Does anybody else have any questions? It looks like people are wrapping up.
So one other just side note that I wanted to throw out there was in thinking about, I started looking through some of our records that are specifically from HBCUs. And one of the interesting things that I noticed is that we do have a lot of kind of the promotional material about the schools. And so that could be useful, I can imagine, for a historic project that looks at how these schools promoted themselves, and also to get a snapshot of what these schools were like in, say, 1952 or much earlier or anything else like that. So there are different ways to look at the records that we have, you know, aside from just the kind of traditional, these are personnel files or these are, you know, kind of administrative records. I think there's some ways to think about those records in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, folks. Anybody else in the queue?
We got one more question coming in.
Cool.
Oscar was wondering if you would say something about funds for the African American Collecting Initiative, and in what way does PHS hope to develop this program?
That's an excellent question. I'm really glad that you brought this up, Oscar. The African American Leaders and Congregations Initiative is supported by dedicated funds that members of our board chiefly have raised. Anyone in the nation or the world is, of course, invited to make monetary donations to AALC. And there is, you can just go to our website, find the give button, and you can specify those donations for AALC. We, of course, we absolutely welcome that. I want to make clear, though, that this initiative and any kind of initiative like it is a matter for, it's a matter that archivists around the world should be doing anyway. I think that this kind of work is like the baseline of the profession, and that we would, as individuals, as professionals, as people, we would be doing the stuff absent a formalized donation structure anyway. It's a matter of corporate responsibility, you know, for the institution. It's a matter of professional responsibility and accountability as archivists to actually begin to transform a profession that, by the way, is 90% white and has historically served the interests of power and of vested white power at the expense of everybody else. So we would be doing this regardless. We do welcome your support. We absolutely need your help to communicate about the initiative with your congregations and with the people that you know.
We have a few more questions that came in, so
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a
Keep
couple.
going.
We can wrap up. Molly was wondering if there's any materials that document the decline of HBCUs and the role that the PCUSA took in that. If there's any records that show the restriction of funds to those schools.
That I would have to look into. No.
Yeah, that's a long-term reference question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's probably not like a smoking gun there, Molly. Do we have anybody else?
That's about it.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. Well, I'm just scrolling through the list of participants, and I just want to thank everybody here. Some of y'all have had emails from us recently. If you haven't had emails from us recently, my email's in the chat. Hit me up so that we can reconnect. And to those of you that we've actually met in person, it's great to see you again virtually. And I hope we can stay in touch.
And I just wanted to say a little shout out to Betty Dura as well.
Yeah, there you go.
Fellow Spelman alum. Thank you for attending today.
That's right.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Good day.
See y'all.